Hello there and welcome to Art and Self. I am Cindy Ingram, your host and the founder of Art Class Curator, the Curated Connections Library, and the Art Connection Circle. In this podcast, we experience the range and depth of what it means to be human, seen through our connections and conversations about intriguing works of art. These art conversations are here to show you that art is here for you as a catalyst, a challenger, a coach, and a comfort. If you love listening to these insightful conversations and you want to be a part of them, I would love to welcome you into the Art Connection Circle. You can get more information at artandself.com/circle, or just click the link in the show notes. Hello, everybody. I am here for another Word of the Year update. So as you may know, my word of the year is artist. And if this is the first time you're listening, I think I'm on my 5th or 6th update for the year. They were going to be weekly, but it's May and I have not done them weekly. But it turns out I don't really need to do them weekly, so that's fine. I have some important thoughts for me about this word right now, and I have two stories that kind of fit together that explain kind of what I'm thinking of right now. So one of them is that my daughter, she's 13, she's in the 8th grade. She is highly creative. I've always known how creative she was. She used to make these just really elaborate videos and just really amazingly creative. And in her theater class this year, she's in advanced theater, and they are doing a project that's called 8th Grade Directs. And all the kids in that class submitted a play, and they wrote like a one-act, like 5 to 8 minute play. And then they wrote the script, they submitted them, and then 5 plays were chosen to produce, to cast for and perform. And hers was chosen. It was amazing, so good. It is so kind of dark and creepy and amazing, which is on par with her personality, but also on par with, I think, a lot of kids these days that, this generation, is very, very dark and creepy. But she was, super excited when she found out that news. She really wanted it. And yesterday was their first rehearsal. So she got to do the casting for it, and she's running her rehearsals, and, she's doing all the blocking and, all of that. And so her first rehearsal was yesterday. The performance is tomorrow. So it's not like it's a big, long thing. They literally have two days of rehearsal, then the play. But her first rehearsal was yesterday. And she came home in just the absolute best mood of all time. She was giddy, hyper, just over the top happy when she got home. And she was like, what is going on? Why am I in such a good mood? It was she just was just over the moon. And I was like, well, what I did is I recognized that feeling. I know that feeling from, if I do a workshop that goes really well, or if one of the sessions of the Art Connection Circle was really powerful, or I write something for my book that I feel really proud of, or, something like that. I know that feeling. I know that feeling of being energized by your creativity, being energized doing something that feels like the exact right thing for you to do, and that you're the exact right person to do it, and you're using all of your talents in the most perfect ways, and everything is aligned, and you're creating something from nothing, and it's so amazing, right? I know that feeling, and I love that feeling, and I feel like I've been chasing that feeling my entire life. And her and I had dinner together last night, just me and her. We were at Potbelly because that's the rest of the family doesn't like Potbelly. So anytime it's just me and her, we always go to Potbelly. And, she was just like, why am I in such a good mood? And I was like, you're a creative person. I was like, I know you created something from nothing. I know this feeling. I was like, listen to this feeling, because this feeling is telling you something really important about who you are and who you're meant to be. I was like, this is showing you that, really look into for your future, because she's going into high school next year. Look into your future doing something creative. Because when it's just such a sign of like listening to your feelings and letting them guide you. And I talk about that all the time, about listening to your feelings and letting them guide you. In my last Word of the Year update, I talked about knowing yourself over and over and over and over and over. I've talked about this in so many different ways. When you read my book, you'll read about it there too. That knowing yourself and knowing who you are and putting your actions in alignment with that is like the most powerful thing. So that happened, right? Okay, so there's a story of listening to that, listening to what brings you joy and letting it teach you about what you value. And then, another thing that had happened in the last week or so is I read the book Rest is Resistance by Tricia Hersey. If you haven't read it, run immediately to your Kindle or your bookstore or wherever or your library or whatever, and get that book, because it was so good. I listened to it on Audible, and she's a poet, so it was like listening to spoken word poetry the whole time. It was called Rest is Resistance, a manifesto, and it was so manifesto. Like, it was so good to listen to. It was just like hearing her words wash over me. I just loved it. At the first, it feels like her reading of it feels a little, not robotic, but it just doesn't flow right. But once she really, that's kind of more in the introduction stuff. Once she really gets into the content, her body took over, because she's a poet and a spoken word poet, and she knows how to deliver a poem. So once you get into that part, it is, I'm just getting chills just thinking about it. It was that good. But she talks about the importance of rest and going inward, and there's a lot of amazing social justice stuff in there. There's how resting not in order to be more productive, but to be more imaginative and to fight the patriarchy and capitalism and all of those things, and white supremacy and all this stuff, and how rest is really revolutionary for a lot of people. So anyway, go read it. But I left that book. I stopped, finished the book, and I was like, the last chapter, she talks about these Sabbaths that she takes that are, because her business is called the Nap Ministry, and she actually kind of created her philosophy and her cause. She sort of figured it out when she was in graduate school for divinity school. So this is kind of like her ministry, right? Of helping people rest. And she creates these art, and she's an artist too. She creates these rest experiences where everybody naps together at the same time, and pillows and blankets or whatever. And she holds this space. It's really cool. So she talks about these Sabbaths that she takes, which is she takes 30 days off where she doesn't do any work. She doesn't do any email. She said work email, so I imagine there's personal email in there. She doesn't do social media. And I think that was it. Those are the main things. And I was like, oh, I want to do that. I left and I was like, oh, I have been feeling, I think that happens at summer, especially when my kids are about to be off school, and I want to breathe and take a break. And, I'm not in the classroom, so I don't have some quote unquote summers off. Not that teachers have full summers off, but I don't have that break, unless I make it for myself, especially because a lot of teachers are doing their planning. So when I support teachers, it's summer almost becomes busier than the school year, because a lot of teachers are ramping up and we're preparing for whatever we're going to sell in August and this and that. So I was like, oh, I want to do that. But then I immediately was like, feeling guilty about doing that because I do have the Art Connection Circle scheduled for this summer, although it's not, it has people registered, but not a lot. I do have, of course, to finish my book. That's like priority one right now. But I immediately was like, no, I don't think I can. Can I do that? Can I? And I was like, well, what would it look like if I did, not get on email, if I didn't do the podcast, if I didn't do social media, and I just took a full-on break and only allowed myself to follow what was restful, follow what was joyful, and follow my creativity as well. And to me, the book it's work, but it's not work. It's creation, and it's a completely different type of work, though it is work. So, if anybody says, oh, I'm doing writing, don't go, oh, how you're just doing writing. And like doing writing is hard work. But right now I have this desire, and I think I had it before I listened to Rest is Resistance, and it's probably why I listened to Rest is Resistance in the first place, why I chose to listen to it. But I was like, what if I just allowed myself to focus on my book and focus on my art, which, spoiler alert, there is my art in the book in the last chapter. And there is some of my art in the last chapter, but I still feel like there's something left to make. I don't know what it is, but it's like, this is where that listening to myself thing comes in, where if I were to truly trust and listen to myself, the answer would be focus only on the book right now. I have a couple coaching clients. Of course, I have to work with them, but what would happen if I just focused on the book and then also my art, which is the book too. And it feels like I am not allowed to do that. It feels irresponsible. It feels like, how am I going to pay the bills? It feels like, because, I am self-employed, and I do have people, on recurring memberships and things like that. But like, if I'm not actively promoting anything, like, what does that look like? And even recently, I did have a day off, because I do block days off every now and then. They're not necessarily days off, but I don't have any meetings deliberately on those days so that I can breathe into the space and be more creative and that sort of thing. And I had a day off, and instead of doing what I would normally do, which is, do podcast show notes or, do social media posts or, tech support on whatever on the website or, update this or, all the things that I do, I was like, I'm going to make art all day. That's what I'm going to do. And so I did. Well, I went to my writing practice because, of course, I always go to writing practice. That doesn't count as a meeting, though it is a mandatory meeting, but it doesn't necessarily count as a day. I don't ever take a day off from that. And I went up to my art studio. I always say up because it's upstairs. And I painted. And for a few hours there, I just, I did listen to a recording from a coaching group I'm in about business. And then and I was like, oh, is that really rest if I'm listening to a business coaching call at the same time as painting? Is that really listening to my creativity? So I turned that off. Then I was just listening to a book, which I think is fine. And then every now and then I would get guilty that I wasn't working. And then I was like, do artists get guilty for not working when they're painting, which is their work? If you're a professional working artist and you're painting, that is a good thing to do. So if my word of the year is artist, and I am saying I am an artist, why the guilt? I don't feel guilty when I go to an art museum, because on some of those days I do go to art museums. I schedule those on my calendar because I want to make sure that I remember to go and that I don't, forget to see exhibits that I want to see, and so I can keep inspired. Like I have a museum visit scheduled next week, and I don't feel guilty when I do that because it feels directly related to my work. I connect with art. I find art to use in programs. I find art to use in the podcast. I grow from it. But and then when I'm writing, I don't feel guilty about that because I'm writing my book. I'm creating something. But for some reason, when I was painting, I did. So that was really fascinating to think about. But that if I fully listened to myself and listened to my intuition, which is what I talk about in the book, which is what I tell people to do all the time, it would tell me, now is the time to go inward. Now is the time to create. I have finished the book. I don't know if I ever said that on here. Probably not. Because the last episode was before the last word of the year episode was before I finished the book. I was near finishing it. But I've finished the first draft anyway. And so I'm going back through and I am editing, and I am ravenously reading memoirs suddenly. Like I could only read fiction this whole time I've been writing this book, and I would even try to read a memoir and I'd be like, oh, I can't read this right now. And like no nonfiction at all. Like I have a friend who wrote a book and released it while I was writing my book, and I read a good part of it, but I was just like, no, I can't read nonfiction right now. I couldn't do it. But as soon as I finished that first draft, it was like suddenly, it was like, I need to read every memoir I can find, and I need to read them as fast as I can. So that feels too a little bit like, it feels like, oh, I'm not working, I'm reading. But, Heather, my writing coach, says all the time that reading is writing. Like reading is working on your writing. Reading is working on your book. So anyway, so my intuition is telling me right now to make art, to write/edit my book, write poems, there are poems on my book, as you know. I kind of rolled my eyes on it, but I'm still getting used to it. I love poems. Turns out, as I'm editing, I'm like, oh, I've been writing poems this whole time. They've just been in paragraph form. I didn't know there were poems. And then I read the paragraph. I'm like, oh shoot, that's a poem. I didn't even know. I just formatted it differently. It turns it into a poem, really. I guess it was a poem already. You don't have to format it any certain way for it to still be a poem. But and I feel like anything else would be a distraction. And that, if I start really working on something else, that is time I'm not spending in this space of creativity, in these final weeks of making this book the best it can be. That if I'm distracted by all these other things, that like my full creative energy, my book isn't getting like all of me. And I feel like it's calling to me to give it all of me right now. So I just need to listen, right? And I need to not feel guilty about it. And that's what Rest is Resistance really allowed me to think about, and allowed me to kind of counteract those feelings of guilt that I was feeling yesterday, and coach myself through it. So yeah, that's what's going on. It's really interesting to look at what's happening right now through the lens of artist. Because in the past, it would always be through the lens of business owner. Is this going to pay off? Is this work going to then make money so that it'll make this work worth it? But in the end, that's not what an artist is thinking about, and it has never been what I've thought about when writing this book, especially like is it writing something that's sellable? I would not have put poetry in it because I don't think this poetry is particularly quote unquote sellable. But it's never been about selling. It's always been about, I have something to say, and I feel called to say it. And that's what being an artist is. It is what an art, it's 100% what an artist is you have this deep desire to do it, and that you can't not do it, you have to do it. And I think most artists none of them come at it from the perspective of, well, maybe not none of them. I just thought of a few that maybe this wouldn't apply to, but it is about expressing something that needs to be expressed. Something in you needs to come out, and it's not for the sake of money or the sake of whatever. It is for the sake of making the thing. And that ties me back to my daughter's joy at her theater thing, that like the joy of the creation process is fantastic. Oh, and like she didn't have to write that play, and she didn't have to, like she could have done tech, or she could have auditioned, like she could have done any number of things, but she chose to do what was the most exciting for her, and what would express what needed to, what was in her to express. Because even before she had this assignment, we went to a trip to Arkansas. I'm back to her again because I'm just so delighted. I can't wait to see her show. It's tomorrow night. I'm recording this on Wednesday, May 17th. So this podcast is going out tomorrow. So if you listen to it tomorrow, or the day it's released, she will, whatever, it doesn't matter. What was I saying? Oh, we went to Arkansas, and like we went with, there was 23 people, it was 6 families. And the kid, and we were in 3 cabins, 2 families in each cabin. And the kids were all running around, and they found in the woods these giant holes in the ground. And they were like, oh, they're graves. And they're like, oh my God, they're the size of bodies. And they were just like, oh, freaking out. And they were like, there's 6 of them. You know, they were just like, they were amazed by these. And that's all they talked about. And then my daughter was like, I want to write a story about this. And, you know, she was like coming up with a story. And so she was like, when I get home, I want to write a story about this. And then when it became time to write this play, she was like, I don't know what to write. She was like, I don't know what to do about this play. And I was like, well, you wanted to write a story about those graves. And then she was like, yes. So she wrote a story. Her play is about those graves, as like a story around them. And, it's so good. Oh, it has this amazing moment at the end. It's like a mic drop moment. Yeah, but she was there, and she experienced life in this place in Arkansas, in these woods, and there was a curiosity, and her brain wanted to figure it out, and then she gave herself the time and the space and the opportunity to explore it, and now it's providing to her such richness. And so I think there's such a lesson in that for me too, that like that it's okay. I'm kind of giving myself a permission slip. I got one from a coach like last week because I was like, I basically was like, I don't want to do all these things, and all I want to do is work on my book. And she just was like, basically talked me into or helped me give myself permission to do that. And I hesitantly gave myself permission, but I'm still grappling with that today. So I think saying all of this out loud even allowed myself to allowed myself to like give myself even deeper and more understood permission. Maybe I need to write myself a permission slip, hang it on the wall. Honestly, that actually would be really helpful. I'm going to do that. Maybe I'll put that in my art journal, a permission slip. I like that idea a lot. Okay, that's what I'm going to do in my art journal tonight, because that's what I'm going to be doing after I pick up the kids from school. Oh, I have to do these show notes. So I'll do the show notes, and then I will pick my kids up from school, and then I will make my permission slip in my art journal. So hopefully I will do that, and then I'll post it on social media. If you go to Art and Self on Facebook or on Instagram, I will post that whenever it's done. Sometimes these take me a few days because I kind of work on them and I'll work on other things and whatever. So we'll see what comes out. Thank you so much for listening. And I hope that you give yourself permission to create and that you give yourself permission to listen to what you truly want and what your intuition is. There's so much wisdom there. And even a person who talks about it all the time still grapples with it. Because there's so many shoulds, so many things I should be doing instead. So I should be doing this, I should be doing that. This is not, I shouldn't lavishly allow myself to create art all day. That's not productive. No, I can. And I will, because I'm an artist and that's my word of the year. And that is that. So thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week on the podcast. I have an amazing interview for you next week. Absolutely amazing. And it was honestly one of my favorite ones. So a lot of them have been my favorite ones, but this one might just be the favorite one. If we judge by that feeling that I got afterwards, which was very similar to how my daughter was acting yesterday after hers. So that's how I felt after. Alrighty. I will stop rambling. Have a good one. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to Art and Self. And if you loved what you heard and you want to be a part of these exciting conversations about art, I would love to invite you to join the Art Connection Circle. In the Art Connection Circle, we get together in an intimate small group and have deep conversations about works of art centered around our own self-development, our own personal experience, and what we bring to the conversation, just like we do in these art conversations on the podcast. You can find more information out about this program at artandself.com/circle, or you can click the link in the show notes. You can also find links to the artworks that we discussed over on the show notes, and then you can also find me on Instagram and on Facebook. Just search for Cindy Ingram Art and Self. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time.